Hello, welcome back to my channel. It's Labor Day, so I have the day off to shoot another podcast. Last time when we left off, we talked about, um, am I my brother's keeper? And we kind of talked about Cain and all the brothers throughout the, like the Genesis stories and kind of asked the question, what if? And I'd like to kind of close off that topic before we move on to the next topic in the next video. But this is kind of like, Am I My Brother's Keeper Part 2? And I want to kind of bring up the cities of refuge in the story of Levi and how they were kind of put in charge of these 6 cities that were given to them in Numbers chapter 35, or if you're Jewish, the Bamidbar chapter 35, the wilderness. And it talks about how, like in verse 6, how the cities that Bnei Israel, the children of Israel, will give to the Leviim, to the tribe of Levi. And they are to be 6 cities of refuge to which you will permit a person who kills someone to flee to so that they can find refuge if they've killed someone by accident. And then in verse 9, it says, this is God speaking, Adonai, to Moshe, and he tells them in verse 10, tell the people of Israel, when you cross the Yarden, the Jordan, into the land of Canaan, you are to designate for yourselves cities that will be cities of refuge for you, to which anyone who kills someone by mistake can flee. These cities are to be a refuge for you from the dead person's next of kin, who might otherwise avenge his kinsman's death by slaying the killer prior to his standing trial before the community. So, my question is, why do you think it's the Levites who are in charge of this? Why not like the tribe of Dan or the tribe of Judah or the tribe of Benjamin or the tribe of like Ephraim or Manasseh? Why specifically the Levites? And I was thinking about this, and I was also thinking about like one of the key words that was kind of revealed to pop out in my brain constantly was it's a city. And I put the two together. I'm like thinking of Levites and a city. Is there any kind of parallel here in the scriptures that God's kind of, or Moses is trying to teach us that God taught him about the Levites, cities of refuge, murder or killing? And I thought about, Shechem when that's all the way back in Genesis after the sister of Levi and Simeon, Dinah, when she is raped by one of the men of Shechem, and then he wants to make right by offering to marry her and to convert to their customs, to their culture, in a way to kind of convert to Judaism before they even called it Judaism, but to convert to the way they lived their lives, the way they to their code of conduct. Let's put it that way, to their laws, to their lifestyle. Him and all the men of Shechem were actually converts. They converted. They took on the sign of Abraham. They took on the covenant between God and Abraham, which is circumcision, as a sign. And so, in a way, they were kind of reborn, right? Like what Christians call being born again, because you've changed your code of conduct, you've converted, you've turned from the way you used to live, and you're living a new life. And so, these men of Shechem kind of were in the same way. They had already converted to become people like uh, like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and so what happened is Levi and Shimeon had a kind of a knee-jerk reaction. They were still kind of pretty ticked off about what happened to their sister. They wanted vengeance. So what did they do? They went and took advantage of the fact that the men of Shechem couldn't defend themselves, and they killed them all. And I think it's interesting that this is about murder, knee-jerk reaction, kind of like I'm talking about Numbers now. Skipping back to Numbers, the lesson that they're kind of teaching to that Moses is trying to instruct the people of Israel when they enter into the new land is to create these cities of refuge. It's kind of in a way like Shuva, like what there's a term in Judaism called Shuva, which is after you've repented of a sin, that you show shuva, which is like kind of a repentance, a 180-degree turn from the ways that you were walking to the way that you're supposed to be walking, the correct direction, and not doing the things you used to do, which you had to do repentance for, and you needed to make um, a offering for your sin, for your hatat, and so shuva is kind of like the works, the steps you take to change from the wickedness that you were doing, the evil that you did. And so, in a way, I can kind of see these 6 cities of refuge that were given to the Levites to govern over um, as a form of shuva for their, they're kind of protecting someone who did a knee-jerk reaction because they did a knee-jerk reaction and they murdered or they killed all those men in Shechem. So now they get to guard over a city, which is a place of refuge for the person who killed someone by accident or by mistake. So I see that kind of as a shuva for them. I don't know if anyone's ever noticed that before or if any rabbis have talked about that, but this is something I kind of came across as I was studying this. And is that, you think about it and you ask why the priests, why Levi? Of course, yeah, it's a shuva for him, but what does Levi represent as priests? Like, what do priests do? What's their job description? And so I went all the way back to like what I remembered in Vayikra, they were called, or in English, it's called Leviticus, like the laws of the priests, which were the laws that Moses wrote down speaking directly to priests, versus like the laws in Deuteronomy, which were speaking to the people. So in Leviticus, it's like the calling of the priest. It's specifically Moses or God speaking to the priest through Moses. And so these are the instructions that he gives them. And part of those instructions are what they should wear. And one of the things that they wear is linen pants. This is something that I always remember from studying Vayikra, is that priests had to wear these linen pants to cover their nakedness, right? And so when they were going to make these offerings in the Holy of Holies, behind the paroket, behind the curtain that divides the Holy of Holies from the rest of the tent of meeting, they would wear this linen to cover their vulnerability, their vulnerable parts, right? Their nakedness. And they would wear this belt around them to tighten it up and cover it. So they wouldn't be exposed. They won't expose what's vulnerable. And in a way, I heard this other rabbi, his name is David Foreman. He spoke about why do they wear these linen pants? And he also brought up the paradox of how they're commanded to come in to make their offerings with joy. But he asks the question, how can you bring an offering of something you're going to slaughter or something you're giving up or losing and be joyful about it? And he brought up the fact that it's not the people who are supposed to be pious and repentant for their recognition of their sin who are to be joyful. He says that it's the priests who are joyful, the Cohen, that they're supposed to joyfully welcome everyone because they know that their job is to cover their sin, to help these people repent and turn and kind of draw them closer to God. That's the joy that they're supposed to have. And so how does this paradox of joy and piety, relate to the linen garments of the priests? It's all in the same passage. And the understanding that I got is that, priests, if they're supposed to be joyful, they have normal lives too. They have wives, they have children, and who knows what kind of thing could have happened to them during the week or just a few hours before their service. They could have woken up and had an argument with their wife. They could have woken up and had issues with their kids. They could have lost a friend who had died earlier in the week and they had to bury them, and then they have to still, they're commanded when it comes on time to make the offerings on Shabbat, they're supposed to be joyful. So in a way, they're covering up their vulnerability of the week or earlier that day. They cover up their own, I guess, things that could be shameful, things that could be almost like a nakedness. They're covering up and not exposing themselves to the person who's coming in with piety. so that they can welcome them joyfully, and remember that they're representing God, who's happy to see the people coming in to make their offering so that they can draw close to him. So that's in a way kind of like what it means to be a priest to me, that you put away your life in a way, the things that you don't want exposed, your nakedness in a way, and you're representing God. That's what priests do, right? They represent God to the people, and they help cover up, and they welcome people with joy so that they can make their um, offering and show their piety and be redeemed. And so that's the kind of the role, the job description that the priest plays based on these passages that I'm seeing. I don't know. Tell me if you see anything different in the comments. But yeah, and so how does this all tie in with the cities of refuge, and with being your brother's keeper or being your brother's guardian? Well, it's kind of like the priests are the guardians of these brothers who had made an accidental death, kind of like the way they did in Shechem. So this is in a way shuva for them to kind of be exactly what a priest is, to cover up their brother's sin. And isn't that kind of like what atonement is? That's what the letters KPR, Kuf, Pe, and Resh in Hebrew. It means to cover, like Yom Kippur, KPR, to cover, as a covering of the atonement of the sin. And then that will help the person who's been atoned to make shuva and change their ways and be redeemed back. That's the role of the priest. That's the role of Levi. That's his inheritance, by getting these 6 cities in a way to kind of, his 6 days of work, and on the 7th day rest. This is his 6 cities of work, where he works to cover his brother and to guard his brother. Like it literally says to guard these cities and to cultivate the land around it, right? For their livestock and stuff. That's all in Bamidbar 35, Numbers 35. Talks about like what they inherit, what their land area is for their livestock. And so it's about cultivating and guarding, kind of like the original commandment given Adam and Eve in Eden. It's to cultivate the garden and to guard the tree of life. And this is, in a way, they're guarding life in these cities, and they're cultivating, these cities so that people can survive in them, so that they can survive in them. And in a way, I also see this as, this is what Yeshua did. He's the ultimate high priest, right? And so he covered all of us, and he represents, like a priest, covering up his own nakedness and making the atonement for all of us. And it's like we are inspired by that to make shuva and turn from our ways. I don't know. That's just that's what I see. Tell me if you see anything different or if you agree. And then I think about what else? I think about how this is kind of, I can't help but think this also goes back to Eden, like I kind of pointed out. It points to Cain, because he, in a way, like I think I talked about this in the first video, is that he didn't really know what he was doing when he killed Abel. He just struck him. He was, in a way, killing accidentally, right? Not planned. And it just so happened that his brother was the first person to ever die. And so it never happened before. So this was a shock to him. And so he took off. He needed a place to find refuge. And so this is something that God is providing later in the many years from Cain as a type of redemption. So yeah, you're seeing this thing parallel the original murder or the original killing. You're seeing it in the middle of the story of man with the Levites and their shuva from their sin at Shechem, and then you're also seeing it in a third parallel with Yeshua, and talking about how how he was the ultimate priest who covered up our shame and kept our dignity. And that's another thing I wanted to kind of touch on is these priests. They what is it to cover up? When I think of covering up, I think of the Noah story, right? You've got Ham, who exposed his dad and took away his dignity by telling his brothers that their dad was naked. And then you got Shem and Japheth, who walk backwards with a blanket. And it's not easy to walk backwards in a vineyard because vineyards are full of big stones. I don't know if you've ever go ahead and Google like what a vineyard looks like in Bordeaux or Napa, and you'll see there's a lot of stones. It's not easy to find footprints in stones, like in sand and soil and clay. Yeah, it's easy to find footprints. But in a vineyard, it'd be kind of tough. You have to actually make an effort to walk in the person's footsteps when you're walking backwards to cover someone up. So it teaches a lesson that when you're trying to save someone's dignity or guard somebody's dignity, you have to take an extra effort to kind of look to walk in their footsteps and walk backwards and experience, put yourself in their shoes in a way, cover them up. That's kind of a lesson. I think most people have missed that because most people don't know what it's like to be in a vineyard. But I've been in plenty of vineyards, so I kind of remember that and I put that together. Anyway, it's about a lesson I learned is that when you're trying to help someone, you don't shame them. You don't point it out. You just cover it up. You save their dignity. Like if someone asks you for help, you don't point out their mistake. You don't need to say anything. You just need to be there for them and cover them up. There's a story I heard about a rabbi whose wife wanted to help this homeless person, and so she had her kid in the car, and she offered to talk to the person and take them into the restaurant and ask them their name and ask them their story and ask them a whole bunch of questions. And then as she was going up to the person, she realized she had like an epiphany, and she ended up just giving him the money for food and wished him peace and went her way. And the lesson that she learned in doing that is if she was to offer him to go sit with him and hear his whole story or invite him to her house and cook for him, it's in a way kind of shaming him is what she thought, because it would like you'd ask someone to open up and they don't have you don't have the liberty to speak into their life quite yet. You just met them, they're a stranger, they need help, yeah, but you don't want to take their dignity away. You want to just help them. And so that's kind of what she did. That's a lesson she learned, and that kind of really took heart with me, that when you're caring for someone, you shouldn't have an agenda. You shouldn't have a point to make with them. You just want to help them and wish peace on them and go your way. I think it was Mother Teresa who said, love has no agenda. It just loves. And that's something I'm learning. Sometimes when you help people, you want to put it on Facebook or Instagram and show that you're a good person so you can get that dopamine when people like it. But that's not, I think that's your reward right there and then, if that's what you're shooting for. But if you want your reward to be in heaven and you really want to like help someone's dignity, I think you just gotta just help them. Don't have an agenda, right? It's like I think of Jesus and Judas. He knew Judas the whole time was going to end up turning on him, but for those 3 years, he still loved him. It's like a brother. He kept him with him all by his side, all the way to the end. He didn't turn from him and rebuke him, even though he knew what he was doing. He loved him, and I think that's what real love is. You don't have an agenda with it. You just show love. And you go after your brothers with that same kind of love without expecting anything back, just open handed. Yeah, so, yeah, and I brought that up because I think about so many times when Christians have tried to reach out to someone and then they find out that they're just not changing, or they don't convert, and then they just leave that person. They don't be a friend to them. just because they didn't say a prayer and go to their church. And that's not real love. That's agenda. Real love would be like Jesus and still be friends with that person. Because what are you doing? You're representing that church has an agenda, that God has an agenda. And I mean, yes, he does. His agenda is to love people and give everyone a chance to be saved and to be part of his kingdom and to live as a citizen in his commonwealth. But you're making a point to the people who look at Christianity or Judaism and they see that you're you have a kind of like a secondhand um, agenda behind what you're doing. It's not real love. And that's all I'm going to say about that. Just that's the pebble I have for your shoe today. Is walk away with that. Just chew on that. Think about it. See if your love is actually genuine. So yeah, I'm going to close this off. Think about Seth and Cain. What if Seth would have been that kind of a guardian for his brother and gone after him? Think about the cities of refuge. Think about what it means to really be naked and to cover up your nakedness or your vulnerability. Like think about Eden. That was a place of nakedness. God never shamed anyone there. He in fact covered up Adam and Eve after their shame. He never pointed out their shame. Think about the inheritance of Levi. Think about what we get to inherit as a kingdom of priests, a holy nation and a royal priesthood. Yeah, we're supposed to be like these priests, represent royalty, represent, you know, the ability to cover people's shame and put our shame away. And think about what it means to cover up. Think about what it means to guard, to cultivate, to provide a place where life can live. Think about how it all points back to Eden and how it all points ahead towards Mashiach, Messiah. That's the pebble for the shoe today. Bye.